Yo, what's up guys? It's Storm bringing you a new card review for Iron Patriot, the newest card in Marvel Snap coming in this new season. Today we will be going over pros, cons, decks, and my overall star rating for this interesting card. So let's hop right into it. So Iron Patriot is a 2-cost, 3-power card that will add a 4, 5, or 6-costed card to your hand, with the ability to reduce its cost if you are winning that lane the next turn. So there's a lot of text in that card, but it's pretty easy to understand. Essentially, as long as you're winning that location the following turn after you play this card, whatever card you generated in your hand will get the cost reduction. Insane card. Insane. I think this card will actually be pretty stupid when it comes to like meta. It'll be meta breaking. Let's go over some of the pros. So there are many cards you can generate with Iron Patriot's ability, and most of them have beneficial effects, especially at a reduced cost. So there's over 120 cards that you can add to your hand with this man's ability. Especially as time goes on, Iron Patriot will not only add cards that, you know, there will only be cards added to the pool that he can add to his hand, but the variety there just becomes more insane, because more often than not, cards added to the game are just good cards. They're just beneficial cards that most decks want to play as we get these more generic cards, right? And looking at the list of available 4, 5, and 6-costed cards, Iron Patriot can find himself in a situation where you can get like really good tech cards, really good big swing play cards, 6-costed cards, 5-costed cards. You could also get some crappy cards, but the thing about Iron Patriot is you can make that choice to play those cards or not. And if you get the cost reduction, which most likely you will, because you'll be building around trying to win that location the next turn, you'll have such a reduced costed card that even if it's a card that doesn't fit in your strategy, the option of having something so reduced is actually going to be insane, right? Playing Iron Patriot in an empty location where your opponent hasn't played gives you a +3 power lead, allowing you to fulfill the cost reduction effect. Easy to work with card due to there being a lot of cards that will help gain priority. So the thing is, there's 3 locations. Turn 2, you get Iron Patriot. The odds that your opponent will play in the same lane as you, honestly, is location dependent. But you can always play this card in a location that's not favorable for both of you guys, like the sewer or Necrotia, where there's like a lot of negative power, and then play a huge power 3-costed card that will ensure that you will win that location. So there are certain plays that you can do with Iron Patriot to make sure that that cost reduction goes through. There's also a kind of sense of control with this card. Your opponent will try to prevent that cost reduction, so you know they're going to play in that lane. So this is where cards like the Guardians cards, right, the Guardians of the Galaxy, where they can really shine through. Or if you have priority on turn 2, you can play something like Negasonic, which will destroy any card that they play in that location, essentially giving you, you know, the win in that location for that turn. So yeah, Iron Patriot is a very flexible card with huge beneficial effect with a low risk cost. The restriction of winning a location isn't as restricting as it may seem. So the downside of this card is that you must win the location, but that's not really too bad, because a 2-3 isn't the best stats, but it's not like it's a Psylocke that's a 2-1. It's not like it's a 2-0. It's a 2-3. You know, those are pretty decent stats, I think, for a 2-cost card with such a huge effect as Iron Patriot. And I think because the card can give you so many different other cards with its ability, this card can honestly kind of be placed anywhere when it comes to like decks. Obviously it can go into certain shells like discard or maybe even destroy, because those decks are very tight knit, but the flexibility that this card allows it to go into a wide variety of decks. Let's go over the bread and butter section. So these are the cards that will essentially go really well with Iron Patriot. So the 2 archetypes that I have here that will go really well with Iron Patriot is card generation and ramp/tempo. So here are some of the examples for card generation. You have the Agents of Shield. So you have your Coulsons, your Valentinas, right? You have your Maria Hills. These cards will go perfect with Iron Patriot because he's already generating a card, right? So you're probably already going to be going a deck that has Quinjet in it, or the newest card that's coming out also the same day as Iron Patriot, Victoria Hand. These cards love generated cards because one, Quinjet will reduce them, Collector will gain power off of the generated cards, Victoria Hand will give them extra power because they were created in hand. So that's kind of an archetype that's creating itself, especially with these newer cards coming out, especially Victoria Hand. I even put Kate Bishop and Devil Dino in here because Devil Dino just gains power off the amount of cards that are in your hand. So just card generation everywhere, right? It's actually going to be a pretty fun archetype to try out. It's almost like playing like Arisheim to a certain extent, because Arisheim gives you all these random cards, right? But essentially that's what card generation does, just a bit more controlled. So I am looking forward to trying out these bread and butter combos. Going on to the next section, ramp/tempo. So honestly, I think where Iron Patriot shines the most is going to be in Wiccan decks. The reason why I say that is because he's going to want to win the location that he's playing in turn 3, right? So it's likely you're going to be playing a lot of strong 3-costed cards or strong 1s and 2s that will help you really swing that location so you can get the cost reduction. And you playing on curve in that way is perfect for Wiccan, right? Even if you don't pull the Wiccan, you're playing all these good early game priority cards, which will allow you to do late, like, you know, really good late game big swings with like Eliath or certain other cards that are really strong later in the game, right? So I think cards like the Guardians and Wiccan and even the newest Spotlight card, Rocket and Groot, are going to be insane with Iron Patriot because people are going to be playing in that lane. You have control over that, where they're going to play. And if they don't play there, then you get this free cost reduction. It's actually pretty insane. So Iron Patriot is going to be a strong card. I think he has really good pros, and his cons aren't even too bad. So speaking of that, let's hop right into the cons then. So Iron Patriot, he has a few counters, right? Mobius, obvious counter. Thing about Mobius, he's around for maybe the first week, maybe the second week, when a card like this drops, but he's only a 3/3. So unless he's played in Surfer, he's not really a card that's going to be around too long. He's there to counter. He is a huge counter. You know, your opponent doesn't have to worry about playing in that same location as Iron Patriot, right? But it's still kind of like, it's a card that's just kind of lackluster, right? US Agent. So the reason why I have US Agent here as a counter is because Iron Patriot has a 4, 5, or 6 cost card, right? And US Agent reduces the power of 4, 5s, and 6s. So no matter what card it is that Iron Patriot generates, US Agent will you know, afflict that negative power to it. So I think it's kind of a niche counter to the card. And Red Guardian. So the way that the text is worded, I feel like if the Red Guardian player has priority, it will negate the Iron Patriot's cost negation. I mean cost reduction if Red Guardian goes off first. If Red Guardian is second, I feel like it doesn't. It's kind of weird, right? Because it says after the next turn. So if it's after, then likely actually Red Guardian should still work perfectly. So I think that's an overall counter to this card. He's actually been insane, right? Red Guardian's been a counter to everything so far. But yeah, Red Guardian, US Agent, and Mobius will be the biggest counters to Iron Patriot. And honestly, even Ronin is a possible card that will benefit off of these card generation decks, right? So be on the lookout for Ronin decks. But yeah, let's hop right into the cons. So there's an element of randomness to Iron Patriot's card generation. There are over 120 plus 4, 5, and 6 costed cards in the game, and it's possible you get a card you don't need. So I mentioned this before, you can't control the effect. Even if it is reduced, you could also get something that, even though it's reduced, you don't want to play. So that's always a possibility with this card. So it's something to think about when playing him. It's something to think about when, you know, let's say you're playing a deck that can't really afford to have you know, their hand filled up with cards, right? I mean, why would you be playing Iron Patriot anyway? But yeah, that is something to think about. 120 plus cards is a bit, it's a lot, you know, but in those cards, there are a lot of beneficial cards, but there are some that definitely won't go with whatever, you know, gameplay you're trying to go. So definitely be wary of that. To fully capitalize on the cost reduction, you must maintain control of the location until the end of the next turn. This may force suboptimal plays to hold the lead. You also might not win the location, losing cost reduction. So a perfect example of that, you play Iron Patriot on turn 2. Opponent plays Mobius in a completely different lane. Let's say you play down Rocket, Raccoon, and Star-Lord. You just put down a 1-1 and a 2-2 for no reason, because they already had the perfect counter to your card, right? You're trying to win a location that your opponent doesn't even care about. And now you have what, a total of 5 power and no 6 power in the lane with only 3 cards there. It's kind of like it's, you know, it's one of those things where your opponent knows what you're trying to do. You know, he's very telegraphed, but you can use that against your favor. You know, it just depends on who you're going against and if they have the right tech cards. Iron Patriot is significantly weaker if he's not placed down by turn 4. His 2-3 stat line is lackluster to say the least. So I'm not gonna lie, you get Iron Patriot on turn 4, it still feels pretty bad, but you can still kind of make it work because you have until the end of turn 5 to, you know, make sure you're winning that location. You get this card turn 5 or turn 6, it's horrible. This card is horrible. So, you know, there is a bit of a deck constraint when it comes to him, because it's another one of those cards where you have to play tempo. You have to play this card on turn 2 or turn 3 to really get the most out of it. And that can be a problem if, you know, you can go multiple games not even pulling Iron Patriot to turn 4 or 5. So, you know, there is that kind of like factor with this card that can be a bit tricky. So let's hop right back into some decks that I think this card will fit right in. The first deck that I've come up with is called Iron Generator. So this deck is basically a card generation, ramp, and tempo deck. It has 7 Series 5 cards, so that's pretty problematic if you are a newer player. But if you have these cards, I think this deck will be insane. It has 7 Series 5 cards, 1 Series 1, 2 Series 4, and 2 Series 3. So essentially what you're going to be doing with this deck, right, is just card generation around the board. So this deck is essentially a Wiccan deck, but you are also just generating so many cards in hand. Devil Dino will be gaining a lot of power from the cards that you generate. You have card generators such as Snow Guard, Hawkeye, even Penny Parker and Iron Patriot. You know, all these cards will be adding so many cards to your hand that you'll find yourself in a situation where Devil Dino will likely be at a 513, 511, even higher at times, depending on how you play it. This deck has 2 1-cost cards in the game. That is on the lower side, especially if you're playing a Wiccan deck. You can definitely switch out, you know, Zabu or Snow Guard, or even if you want to kind of lower the amount of card generation cards that you have, you know, you can switch out Penny or Hawkeye and place in something like Quicksilver to ensure that your Wiccan plays kind of, you know, goes off. Victoria Hand is in this deck because there's a bunch of card generated, you know, in your hand, and she'll be giving a lot of power to those cards. Juggernaut is an insane synergy with this card, because with Iron Patriot in particular, because you place him on 2 and Juggernaut comes out on 3, and it doesn't matter if they play something with more power, because Juggernaut's gonna throw them somewhere else. So that's a pretty insane synergy that will always give you that cost reduction that you're looking for. Gladiator is a 3/8 that is really hard to beat with just pure stats. The only other card that's like, you know, that's close to that is Swordmaster, but Swordmaster is a 3/7 with a discard effect that most people don't want to use even in discard decks. So it's kind of like, you know, Gladiator kind of holds that spot of strongest 3-costed card power wise, right? And Alioth. So the reason why Alioth is in this deck is because Alioth is a good late game play especially when you're getting that extra power from that extra energy from Wiccan. He's just insane. He's just insane. And Zabu's here just in case that you get the Wiccan early, just in case. There's a possibility. So he can be switched out too, because there's no other 4-costed cards in the deck. But you could also kind of change this deck around if you want and add Galacta or add Gwenpool or some of the other stronger 4-costed cards, so Zabu gets more of an impact in this deck. The second deck is Guardian Surfer. So this deck is interesting because I essentially mixed the Guardians of the Galaxy deck with Surfer cards. The reason why there's so many 3-costed cards in this deck is because, again, Iron Patriot wants to be winning on turn 3, so just increasing your chances of having a good 3-costed card on turn 3 is just higher with the amount of 3-costed cards in the game. In this deck, sorry. Baron Zemo is an interesting card in this deck because essentially he'll be snatching a card from your opponent's deck and putting it on his side, just further increasing the odds that you'll be winning that location, especially because a 3/5 is not, and it's not a bad stat at all. It's pretty good. Copycat is just a really good generic 3-costed card. Rocket and Groot, it's a 4 out of 5 card in my opinion. It's pretty new still, but again, stealing power is always going to be good. And speaking of stealing power, Cassandra Nova, turn 3 she'll always be a 6-powered card, so it's, some of these cards here are just insane. And once you place down a few of them by like turn 6, you probably have like 3 or 4 3-costed cards, and you could do something like Surfer into Grandmaster, right? You get the double Surfer proc, and that leaves space for you to put down Rocket, or space for you to put down Hydra Bob. So this deck, I think, actually is going to be a low-key sleeper, and it's really going to benefit. It's really going to benefit off of the Iron Patriot deck too. So yeah, just definitely be on the lookout for these 2 decks. I have the deck codes in the description. And here's my final star rating. So Iron Patriot overall is a 4 out of 5 card. 4 out of 5 star card, sorry. I think that he is going to be only better as time goes on. I even think he might get a nerf because the cost reduction is kind of insane. Turning a 4-costed card into a 0, just straight up free card, is actually pretty insane with the amount of good 4-costed cards in the game. And turning a 6-costed card into 2 with no other drawback, just straight up a 2-costed 6-costed card is actually pretty insane. So I can see them kind of tweaking maybe how much the cost is affecting these cards, like maybe -3. I think -2 is kind of too much. They would have to buff his power, but I can see that this card, it will be vulnerable to being nerfed, and that does kind of play a factor on, should you buy the season pass for this card? And I think that you should, because it's always going to be good value, but be wary that this card is going to be good and it's likely going to be nerfed, I think. And just rounding out some of my final thoughts, with a low risk cost and a card generation ability tied to a strong cost reduction, Iron Patriot will be a strong card whether his reduction happens or not. Iron Patriot, along with Victoria Hand, will revive a long lost archetype card generation. So those are just my closing thoughts on it. I'm excited to try out Devil Dino. I think Devil Dino is going to be really good. Glad to see all these Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and just card generation cards in general just coming back. The meta needs to be shaken up because it's just been Doom and Move and the same stuff for like 2 months now. So I'm excited to see some cards to shake things up. And yeah, just I thank you guys for getting through the video. I'm Storm, and I'll see y'all later. Peace out.